Welcome everybody, this is How to English, Teach and Learn with Gav and Em.
It's a podcast about teaching and learning English as a foreign language.
All opinions stated are personal and references will be given when necessary. Welcome Em.
Hi Gav.
How you doing?
Very well.
Are you ready for a new episode of Gav and Em's How to English podcast?
You bet I am.
That's great. And you do remember, although some people may have forgotten, that today this is the episode referred to as episode 11 season 2.
What are you going on about?
Okay.
I thought you were going to tell me it was your birthday, but what?
All right, let me say it more simple. Em, today's episode is episode 11 season 2. And the title is, do you remember what I sent you in that message?
I remember. It's another language.
Another language. Ooh, mysterious. What could it mean, Em?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Can you tell me what you think it means?
Well, we often talk about English. I think we also infer other languages. So we're not only talking about English. If you're learning a language, I think all the tips and tricks that we have mentioned in previous shows, that our guest speakers have mentioned, these are all applicable to all languages. Now, there is a language that we have never mentioned as far as I remember, and that's one that we will deal with today.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into this one.
Yeah, well, as usual, we have a special guest who knows a lot more about this topic than we do. So we are really privileged to have on our show today Ahmed, who is a podcaster. He is also a speaker. He's a consultant. If I just read you something from Ahmed's website, Em, it's called hearmeoutcc.com. And according to Ahmed, the Hear Me Out CC is a place where hearing people can learn how to connect and engage with deaf people better, plus work together to bridge the gap between the hearing and deaf worlds. And you can also sign up to Ahmed's regular bulletins or newsletters from his website, where he promotes his videos and podcasts and also his articles, focusing on topics around deaf awareness. Before we listen to our special guest, Em, let me first tell you about some of the services Ahmed provides. For example, there is the Power Hour Deaf Consultancy. Ahmed explains how to make your virtual events more deaf accessible, what you need to think about when creating podcasts and videos, what to consider when organising events, and how to make your products more deaf friendly. And I think this is really key to what we're doing as podcasters and also as educators. These things we need to know too. Also, you can ask Ahmed to speak at your event. And some of the topics that are available are making captions beautiful to engage with your audience better, unleashing the untapped potential of deaf employees, deaf and isolated, the challenges of being an in-betweener, and how teachers can help unlock the potential of deaf students. So there's loads here for our teacher listeners to take on board if they have a deaf student or they're considering how to make their own teaching more accessible.
Brilliant. So can we hear from Ahmed?
Yes, let's listen to Ahmed now.
Hey, what's up everyone? My name is Ahmed Khalifa and I run a website called hearmeoutcc.com. It's all about deaf awareness. People don't really think about it, but there's actually a very close link with languages and deaf awareness. It's a very big topic. From my own experience, I am someone who loves languages, and I had to, for example, learn English in the early days because I moved to the UK and I was actually speaking Arabic at the time, and now I mainly speak English. But I had to learn that, and it was a bit challenging for me to hear other people. It requires a lot of strength, and we have this thing called concentration fatigue or even listening fatigue, where when we listen to other people speak, it takes a lot of energy, a lot of cognitive energy to be able to listen and just have it in your brain and then translate it and then be able to reply if you need to. It's a lot of work, and that was something that I had to go through when learning English. And then I gradually then decided to learn other languages, mainly Spanish. I taught myself Spanish, and that was self-taught in a way with a few classes here and there, but also because I have a lot of Spanish friends. But then I have come to a conclusion where I have decided that I will not learn oral languages again because of the strain that caused for me and for other people when they have some kind of deafness, when it's kind of severe or profound. It's very, very challenging, and for me it has been extremely challenging to listen to other people speak in other languages, let alone in your main or native language. And for me, it's just a lot of work, and I decided to then focus my energy elsewhere. And that is where we come into sign language. That is obviously very similar experience in terms of when you're learning a language, you're going through the same challenges. You're trying to learn the grammar and the vocabulary and try to communicate and understand. And of course, there are some unique situations because it's not verbal, obviously, it's not oral, but it's beautiful. And people also need to understand that, FYI, sign language is not a universal language. Every country has their own language, just like in the oral word. Every country will have their own regional dialects and regional accent. And that is something that people are not aware of. And it's important that people are aware of that, because it's just an illusion that if you have sign language, then you can communicate anywhere around the world, which is not the case. So in my situation, I'm learning BSL, British Sign Language. And that obviously is focused on Britain, and yeah, there are overlaps in other places, like for example Australian Sign Language and New Zealand Sign Language. There are some similarities, but when it comes to American Sign Language, it's actually different to BSL, because American Sign Language has a history with French Sign Language. There's a very, very close connection between the two. And then we get really detailed about the history of sign languages. That's the whole other conversation. But one thing that I want people always to be aware of is that if you want to learn a language, consider sign language as well. Especially when you think about when you are thinking on the purpose of learning sign languages is to communicate with people. But then don't forget, in your own country, there are people who are speaking a language that you are not aware of, which in this case is sign language. And they are trying to break down barriers in their own country. And that's something that people don't think about. They think about learning international languages, which is fair enough. There's nothing wrong with learning other languages across the world. But you can learn a language that is also native in your own country. So in my case, it would be English, but also BSL. This then means that I have an opportunity to communicate in BSL in your own country, because you're not always going to find someone who speaks French or Spanish, or maybe those languages that are rare in terms of, popularity. It's quite challenging unless you look for local communities. But you can still find someone in your country who speaks a native language, which is their own country's sign language. And I think people should always consider sign language as another kind of tool in their language belt. And it should be there for the breaking down barrier and communicating with deaf people. It should not be there for the thing that we see in social media, unfortunately, which is to look cool and to create music and do these sign songs and make it look like it's a trendy thing in social media, and you're doing it for the clout. And that is the wrong reason to learn sign language. And that is not something that should be encouraged, but unfortunately, it's extremely popular in social media. But I challenge you to consider sign language and to get involved with the local deaf community and communicate with them and help to break down barriers even more in your own country. You can change someone's life by doing that, because they will feel less alone, because the language is oppressed. They don't feel heard. But you can help by learning sign language. So So take into consideration of sign language when you are considering to learn a new language.
What a great guest. Wow. There's so much in there to think about, and I must admit, I feel like there was a lot that I hadn't considered before.
Yeah, me too.
I think the fact of just adding sign language as an option to languages, just thinking of it as another language that anyone can learn, and as Ahmed said, another tool in your language belt. I like that idea, and there must be so many people who don't think even that's an option.
Yeah, definitely. Ahmed made so many really good points. I've made a few notes just so that I can mention them again. This fatigue of listening to people speaking when learning an oral language is a real strain on the learner.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that. It must be really exhausting.
And sign language clearly has its own challenges, where you've got the grammar to learn, the vocabulary. It's also a very expressive language where you have to use gestures to express yourself. I know making eye contact is really key. So there are lots of nuances that a communicator in sign language needs to use.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to learn more, and I really do want to try to pick up at least a few things and see if I can learn.
Yeah, well, I'm going to come back to Ahmed's challenge a bit later and see what we can take on board and challenge ourselves. But first of all, let's have a look at a couple of statistics. Em, can you tell me how many deaf and hard of hearing people there are in the UK?
No, Gav, I have absolutely no idea.
Okay, there are, according to the UK government, 11 million people.
Wow, really? That's a lot more than I thought there would be.
And can you tell me how many BSL users there are in the UK? British Sign Language users?
11 million, you said?
Yes.
So maybe what, 5 million?
151,000.
Is that all?
It's really surprising.
So there's definitely something not quite right there.
That's a really big difference.
Yeah. So maybe it's just not available to people as much as it should be. And it shouldn't just be available to the deaf, it should be available to anyone who wants to learn it.
Of course, like any other language in school.
Yeah.
I don't remember being offered sign language.
Definitely not, no. Why not? That's the question. Why not?
I didn't know there were so many varieties of sign language. Obviously, you've got the British, the BSL, you've got American, ASL, but then there are so many other varieties that we probably have never heard of.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Another point I wanted to go back to was Ahmed saying that this breaks down the barriers for people in your own country. There's a whole community of people who you aren't able to communicate with.
Of course, it's obvious really when I think about it. It's not until you are presented or shown that you would even consider that as an option. So there must be a lot of people who are very isolated and they're not communicating with anyone because they're just not aware of it, or there isn't that support there.
Yeah. So let's have a look at Ahmed's challenges. He mentioned learn sign language and join a deaf community. That's a small d or capital D, depending on how you prefer.
What's the difference?
So the capital D means that you recognise yourself as being part of the deaf culture and community.
Right. So then you would need to go online and find some groups.
I'll put some references in the show notes for people who are interested, and also would really recommend getting in touch with Ahmed and see if he can give you some advice too. So tell us about Coursera, Em.
It's a free course. It's open to anyone. You just need to go to coursera.org and put into the search bar Educating Deaf Children. And it's a 4-week course taught by Odette Swift and Tara Kuhn, who are clinical educators. And it's 3 or 4 hours a week. It's in English with subtitles in French, Portuguese, Russian and Spanish. And if you want, you can apply for a certificate. Each week you study a different aspect of deaf education. Week 1 is the experience of being deaf, how it impacts learning. And I've just started the first unit in week 1. And at the moment I've been introduced to the presenters and a couple of deaf people talking about their experiences growing up in South Africa and the school system there, and how it's quite segregated for deaf children. They either go to a mainstream school and then they're not really given the same opportunities. A lot of them are held back because they're not allowed to continue with certain subjects because there isn't the support there, or the teachers can't use sign language, or they go to a very tailored school and that school is not really part of the other communities, so they're not with their friends or their siblings. So yeah, it's really interesting sort of how it affects society and the big picture of that as well, and how that creates challenges for deaf people.
Mm-hmm.
One of the presenters was saying that he wasn't really able to fulfill his dream of becoming a deaf doctor because the school wouldn't allow him to go past a certain level of education, which I had no idea about. So that was the week I've just finished. And then week 2 will be the role of teachers in developing resilience in deaf children. And then it's creating an accessible learning experience. And then week 4 is becoming an empowered teacher. So there are tasks as you go along. You watch videos, there are questions to answer and optional essays to write as well if you want.
That's absolutely fascinating. And I think at the end of each of the units, you reflect on what you've learnt and you write some feedback, which is then peer reviewed.
Yeah, and there are communities there, and there is a kind of social aspect to it. If you want, you can start talking to people. There's a chat room, and so that might be a good way to get connections.
So for the last part of the show, Em, I thought we could talk about some things that are related to this topic, how we can apply some of this knowledge to our own teaching, learning, and some of the resources that we're involved in. For example, we both have quite a big social network, and we often post adverts to our social network. Now, something that I have been really focused on in the last few months is, firstly, to make sure that there are subtitles or closed captions on each of the posts that we make. We both believe it's really important that our viewers are able to follow what we're talking about in the adverts, and without captioning, it's impossible. So whether we're talking about deaf learners, if we're talking about maybe low-level students, anybody that might need that support will be able to enjoy the captioning that we put on the adverts.
So how do you do that? How do you get that captioning?
Well, I'm glad you asked me, Em. So there are lots of different apps you can use, which are free. For example, there's AutoCap, there's VoiceSeller, there's Captioned with a K, there's Get Subtitle. At the moment, I'm actually using Wave, W-A-V-V-E, which is great, and it allows you to add captioning to your videos.
And so how long would it take to add that?
It only takes a few minutes to add to your videos.
Yeah, so there's no reason not to. There's lots of choice and it doesn't take long, and it really could benefit some people.
I think so. Also consider alt text.
Alt, did you say?
Yes.
A-L-T?
Yes.
Alt, okay.
Which is available on Twitter and on Facebook and on Instagram, where you put a description of the picture into the app, which makes it more accessible for everyone.
So how is it different? So you say the captions are just like subtitles that come up as you watch the video, and it's somebody speaking, and then you've got that at the bottom. And then the alt text is describing a picture in, how would it be seen on the actual page? Do you have to click on something, or is it just there?
Well, in this case, a blind person or person with sight impairment could hear the words being read by a screen reader.
Right, a reader like an app on their phone.
Or on your personal computer. You could also write it in the comments part of the description, so you type ID, capital, with colon, and then you just type in the description below, and anybody can read that.
Okay, this is all really good to know.
Also, one last thing is to make a transcription for your podcast and make that freely available as well. And the company that I use is called Descript, but there are plenty of other companies. Just make sure that there is a readable text available for anyone to look at.
And also on YouTube, make sure your videos are captioned. Good tip.
Now, before we go to our musical guest at the end of the show, I wanted to mention one more thing, a link to the British Sign Language Association. They are british-sign.co.uk, and they have a course that you can sign up for, which is Introducing British Sign Language, which I think would be a great challenge, as Ahmed suggested earlier. And the sign language course is typically £25, but you are free to pay whatever price you want.
What a great offer, Gav. I've got an idea.
What's that?
Should we make a pact to do the course together?
Yes, okay, we can do that. So we're going to learn the basics of sign language together.
Yeah, because I'd really like to know how it works and how sign language deals with tenses, for example. How do you talk about the past? How do you talk about the future with the gestures or the signs? So yes, I've only seen it and I don't know much about the construction of the grammar. So I'm very curious to find out more about that.
Wonderful, me too. Let's shake on it.
We'll sign up as soon as possible.
So I think we can both take on this challenge, Em.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that one.
Em, I've just remembered there is actually one more thing.
One more thing.
One more thing.
How many one more things can you get in one episode?
I think this is the last one more thing.
Okay.
I've been thinking about doing a live cast.
Live cast.
Where we invite our teacher and learner followers to a live session where we can share ideas, teaching tips, learning suggestions. And do you think people would be interested in this, Em?
I don't know, Gav. You'd have to ask them.
Oh, that's a good idea. Why don't I ask them now?
Okay. We formally or cordially invite you.
No, I don't want to make it that formal.
No. Go on.
So we're just putting the feelers out. If anybody's interested, please get in touch with us. Maybe we'll have some online sessions. And I thought each session could correspond with one of the episodes. So we start at the beginning with first lessons and episode 2, types of lessons. So we could have a session on types of lessons, lesson and course planning, technology, making mistakes. You remember all the early shows, Em?
Of course I do, like it was yesterday. I love it. It's a great idea. And then our listeners can give us their opinions and share their ideas with us, and we can all have a nice, good chat.
It's a bit like the staff room. So we're all sitting around, we're all sharing our ideas and contributing together.
I like it. An online staff room.
Okay.
Good. Would this be a good time to do some shout outs, Gav?
It would be. That's a perfect time. So shall I start?
Yeah.
So a special thank you to all these followers, starting with Ingles_online_UY.
English_glossy.
Cindy_ELT.
Cindy with a C.
Yes.
Teacher Bia Vieira.
IELTS_Meshcat Education.
English Saharatemi with a lot of I's at the end.
There's 7 I's.
7 I's.
Sanaz_English_teacher.
Prof.Larissa Campos.
And finally, Lynn M. You can do this one.
Lynn Gianocaro.
Exactly how I was going to say it. So thank you to all of those wonderful people for their lovely comments on Instagram. Please go and find them. You can find links in the show notes to their pages.
And if any of those people fancy having a chat online with us, with the live cast, what was it? Live cast. With the live cast, get in touch with us, you or anyone else. So the song today, are you ready for the song?
I am.
So this song is by Ellie Meriz, who has a stage name of Ellie Meriz.
Mm-hmm.
And we are very lucky this week, Gav, because we've got 2 songs.
2 songs?
Not one, but 2 songs.
That's wonderful.
Elodie has been very generous and given us 2 tracks from her EP that will be out in October.
Wow.
So she's going to introduce herself, talk about her music, and then we'll hear both of the songs.
That's wonderful. So, Em, let's have a listen.
Okay, Gav, and I will see you next time.
See ya!
Hello, Gav and Em. My name is Elodie Pereira, but my stage name is Ellie Meriz because that's just easier to pronounce for everyone. So I'm primarily an English teacher. I've been teaching business English in particular for a few years now. I studied at the University of Manchester in the UK. I studied linguistics and translation. And then I spent a few years in London where I worked as a copyright administrator and also a music curator. So I was making playlists, which was a really cool job. So when I go back to France, where I'm from, I wanted to put all of this knowledge, the company knowledge, the language skills to use. That's why I specialized in business English, and so teaching company employees and students as well to prepare them for the workplace speaking English. So as a hobby, I'm a musician, I'm a singer-songwriter, and I've slowly started to professionalize my hobby a little bit more. I met up with 4 musicians in September 2020, and we worked on an EP, which will be released early October. So I'm very happy to be sharing 2 of the songs from this EP. So the first one is called You're Young, and it's been recently released on the various platforms, including Spotify. And the second one is going to be exclusive to you because it hasn't been released yet, and it's called In Love With It. So thank you so much for having me, and I hope you'll enjoy the songs.
I never talk to you, babe, 'cause I can't say out loud that my desire's burning when I look in your eyes. I'm just a passing shadow, a fading reason why, and I'm in love with a ghost. I'm in love with my past. Can you see me now? Oh, tell me, can you see me when you look at me like that? You're in the light. You smile at me. Is it